recording in Japanese? Paano mo lang tawagin? Ano yung tumawag? Kaya tawag sila sa akin. Pero alam mo, Oo. Sige, sarap na. Ano? Ayaw mo isara? Sabihin mo may meeting, ha? Kaya nga eh.
Tahu ini kayak gini, nonton apa? tapi nggak baik-baik ya. Lembut, lalu sampai mati. Mulu kalau ini mah. Biasa aja, nggak usah sedih gitu. Jangan aja lu.
Hello everyone. Thank you for being here today to join us. Thank you for your attention. Well, the webinar will get started in 5 minutes at around 4. So I'm going to play this company introduction video one more time. Please enjoy it. And after this video, I'm going to get started with today's content. Okay, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you. Please enjoy the video. Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello. Well, thank you for being here today to share your information and thoughts with us. Well, let me introduce myself. This is Shia from Lipotronic. I am the product manager currently taking over our eClear products, while including the eClear analyzer as well as the eClear reagents. Yeah, so feel free to contact me if you have any concerns or questions regarding our eClear products. Well, today is more about our eClear-based analyzer, eClear 8000. And before I get started, actually part of our sales teams are here as well, and I believe they would like to send their greeting to you as well. Hi guys, do you want to say hi to our customers? Okay, actually today we have Aki, we have Michelle, we have Sarah, and we have Aki. We have JT. Also, guys, do you want to say hello to our customers?
Hey guys.
Yeah, just share your greetings.
Hello.
Sorry, I believe something's wrong with the connections. All right, but anyway, like I've mentioned, today is more about our eClear 8000 and our thyroid test items. So please allow me a few seconds to share my screen, share the slides of today so you can see the content of today. Okay, I believe they are available to your screens now, right? Okay, so I think we could get started at this moment. And okay, so today is more about our eClear 8000 based analyzer, eClear 8000, and our test items for thyroid function detection, like how are these tests are used and how's the clinical performance of our test. Well, so today I'm going to cover these 4 sections. Firstly, the highlighting points of Lipotronic eClear system. I mean, why do we stick to eClear? What makes eClear extraordinary? Well, secondly, what is thyroid and what are the related diseases of thyroid? And thirdly, what are the most useful thyroid test items and how can we manage thyroid diseases using these thyroid test items? And finally, I'm going to share with you some clinical performance of Lipotronic thyroid test items. I'm going to share with you some data that we collected during the R&D process and in hospitals. Okay, then let's get started with the highlighting points. Well, I see that some of the audiences are new here and some other names are quite familiar to me. But anyway, I believe for all of you, you will understand the unique advantage of eClear better after this part. Well, about Clear, what our market actually covers 3 kinds of Clear. They are the electrochemiluminescence immunoassay, eClear, the one that we are using, and enzymatic and direct Clear. Well, among them, eClear is definitely a more advanced technology, and so far there are only 2 brands in the world that is using eClear, which is Roche and Lipotronic. So we are just getting started, but we are actually experiencing dramatically increasing development. And Roche, they have covered 20% of the Clear market. Therefore, I would say eClear definitely owns the highest market recognition. And these are the basic parameters of our eClear analyzer. I think you're quite familiar with this. So let's go through the slide pretty quick. Well, the methodology that we use is eClear. It has 10 reagent channels, 30 sample positions, and actually there are 3 sample racks. And in each rack, there will be places for 10 samples. So that's 30 sample positions in total. And it has 100 incubation positions. The sample type that it can support is serum and plasma so far, and we are expanding this to urine and amniotic fluid as well. Well, the normal test speed is that it will take around 80 minutes for you to get the first test result. And for some stat tests, also for all of our antibody tests and all of our tumor marker tests, only 9 minutes, and you can have your first test result to be released, which I believe is the fastest analyzer on the market right now. But the throughput is 86 tests per hour. And finally, this is a relatively small analyzer. This is really compact. As you can see, we have this internal operation system here embedded in this analyzer. So you don't need to purchase another computer for the analyzer, which would definitely cost you some space. However, our analyzer is pretty compact and it has this operation system here. All right, but what is ECL exactly? Well, we can tell from its name that it's the combination of electrochemiluminescence and immunoassay. Well, ECL, electrochemiluminescence, is a kind of luminescence produced during electrochemical reactions in solution. So basically, this means that only when there is electricity, there is possibility for it to illuminate and give out light. And if there is not electricity, there is not going to be any light signal. And together with immunoassay, we got ECL, a novel and quantitative method for the measurement of antibody or antigen. While speaking about the advantage of ECL is that we can have good spatial control of the light signal, just like what you normally see in figure B. So in ECL, the complex is evenly distributed all over the planar surface, which means you won't get much signal at one point while less signal at the other. And this is actually what you normally get from the other clear, just like what's shown in figure A. These are actually called the tube luminescence with uneven light always. However, as you can see in ECL, the lights are always even all over the planar surface. In addition, we can conclude this from figure C and D here that in ECL, because the reaction only happens when potential is applied, therefore you can get it started or stopped by varying the potential. And therefore in ECL, as long as the voltage is applied, you could always get pretty stable glow light generated all the time, which give you a very stable glow light generated and very long detection window. However, from the other technology, once the reaction is started, it will keep going on until it's finished and there's no control. Therefore, normally the signal that we get from the other clear is either this kind of decreased flow light or this kind of flashlight. And I would say these two kind of lights are definitely more difficult to be detected. But yeah, as you can see, these won't happen in ECL. And therefore in ECL, the light signal are always even and stable. And all this contributes to the high sensitivity of ECL. Well, so now let's briefly summarize this in table. Basically in ECL, there are only two brands in the world that is using ECL, which is Roche and Lipotronic. So this method is actually quite unique. And in ECL, the label is pretty stable. It won't be hydrolyzed, for example, it won't be affected by temperature like enzyme. These are enzymes. Also, the ruthenium label that we use in ECL won't be hydrolyzed by water like ester or luminol that is used in direct clear. So this is basically one of the advantage of our label, which is pretty stable. Well, the second advantage is that the ruthenium label that we use in ECL is pretty small in molecular weight, and the smaller the molecular weight, the smaller the steric hindrance, which makes it suitable for the detection of small molecular weight antigen and antibody, such as T3, T4, TSH, E2, progesterone, testosterone, and other small molecular hormone projects that we are going to talk about later. All right, and in ECL, as the signaling process is more controllable as well, and this ensures the high sensitivity, better detection repeatability, smaller CV value, and more stable detection result, and the sensitivity is extremely high in ECL. Okay, so like I've just explained, the test items in thyroid panels are pretty small in molecular weights. As you can see, these are all small molecular weights antigen. Which means that the enzymatic clear is not suitable for the detection of these kind of test items. And when comparing with direct clear, ECLEAR have a better repeatability and lower CV value, which is more advanced technology. And now let's have a look at all of our test items. And these are all the available test panels currently, including COVID-19, infectious, hepatic fibrosis, gastritis, tumor marker, bone metabolism, glycometabolism, cardiac markers, fertility, thyroid, inflammation, and anemia. So we have introduced more than 60 test items covering many panels, and we have covered the most basic test items clinically, and many more are definitely still on developing. Well, I've just mentioned that we have many 9-minute tests. Let me mark those for you. So these antibody tests, these tumor marker tests, and these 5-step tests here are the 9-minute tests that we can offer you at the moment. So we have over 29-minute tests, which I believe is pretty fast when comparing with other brands on the market. Well, and today we will mainly talk about the thyroid test items, which is TSH, T4, T3, FT4, FT3, TG, TBG, anti-TGIT, and anti-TPO. And these are all 80-minute tests. I'm going to share more of these later when talking about these test items. All right, so finishing part 1. Now in the next part, I'm going to share with you some information about thyroid diseases. I mean, we need to know what are the commonly seen thyroid disorders before knowing when and how do we use the thyroid test items, right? So yeah, in this part, I'm going to share with you some information about the related thyroid diseases. All right, so thyroid dysfunction is pretty common, especially in old people. I guess some of you might know something about this. Actually, thyroid dysfunction, it is emerging as one of the most common diseases around the world now. And these two figures here shows you the map of the overt thyroid disease prevalence in the world. And nowadays, the prevalence of overt diseases is about 2%. Overt means it is pretty obvious hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. Okay, so the prevalence of hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism is about 2%, while subclinical diseases is far more prevalent, and the prevalence of subclinical diseases is estimated to be within around 4 to 15%. Well, in addition, it is important to mention that congenital hypothyroidism is one of the most common congenital diseases, and it actually affects 1 in 4,000 newborns. As a result, there would definitely be a huge demand of thyroid test items, right? All right, so thyroid is a small butterfly-shaped gland that lies flat across the windpipe at the base of the throat. Actually, you could touch it. It's at around here. But I hope you can't touch it, because if you touch your thyroid, that means something is going wrong. So I hope no one can touch it at the moment. Okay, so the thyroid gland is a pretty small, but it plays very important role in controlling the body's metabolism by producing thyroid hormones. And two of the most critical thyroid hormones are thyroxine, T4, and tridothyronin, T3. So T4 and T3, these two kinds of hormones will be released by the thyroid gland, and then they will go through the blood to every part of the body, and then tells the cells in the body how fast to use the energy and produce proteins. So thyroid hormones, they are actually multifunction. Sorry. Okay. So thyroid hormones, they are actually multifunction. Sorry, something goes wrong with the internet. Let me mark those for you. Okay, I'm going to move on from now. So like I've mentioned, thyroid hormones, they are multifunctional, and they actually act on nearly every cell in the body, and they act to increase the metabolic rate. They affect the protein synthesis, they help regulate the bone growth and neural maturation, and they have so many functions. So I believe you can see how important they are, and therefore thyroid test items, they are always one of the most demanding test items around the world. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the next page. Okay, so in the next slide, I'm going to share with you a simplified diagram of how thyroid hormone T3 and T4 are produced and released into the blood. Well, as you can see, the hypothalamus is able to release the TRH, which is thyrotropion releasing hormone. What TRH will then release, TRH will then stimulate the pituitary gland to produce thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. And then the TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to produce TG, thyroglobulin. And TG is actually a kind of protein. It is the precursor of T3 and T4. And the TG is then cleaved by the enzyme called TPO, thyroperoxidase, to produce T3 and T4. So I believe this is quite clear for you. Basically, TRH stimulates TSH, TSH stimulates TG, and then TG will be clipped by the TPO to produce T3 and T4. So this is actually a flow chart. All right, so I hope this is quite clear for you at the moment. And after that, when needed, the thyroid would release T3 and T4 into the blood. Later in the blood, most T4 and T3, they are bound to a protein called TBG, tyrosine binding globulin, TBG. And actually, these forms are thought to be inactive. However, the small amounts that are unbound, called FT4 and FT3, or free T4 and free T3, they are the active form of the hormone. Well, so most of the thyroid hormone circulating in the blood is bound to transport proteins, and only a very small fraction is unbound and biologically active. Therefore, measuring concentrations of 3 thyroid hormones is sometimes to be thought important for diagnosis, while measuring total level can be misleading sometimes. Well, I'm going to explain more of this to you later. Also, in the next slide, I'm going to share with you that the body actually has an elaborate feedback system to control the amount of T4 and T3 in the blood. And this is realized by the HPT axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and thyroid axis. Okay, and even though the T4 and T3 that are produced and released by the thyroid, actually these feedback system also include TSH made by the pituitary gland and TRH, which comes from the hypothalamus. Well, basically, when thyroid hormone levels decreases in the blood, the hypothalamus would release TRH, right? Which in turn causes the TSH to be released as well. Then TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to produce and release T4 and T3. These are what we've explained just now. And when the need arises, the thyroid gland produces more T4 and releases some of what is stored. And then as thyroid hormone levels increases in the blood, the increased levels of thyroid hormones will signal the hypothalamus to stop secreting TRH. And then there's no more TSH as well. And then the thyroid produces less T4 and T3. So basically, this is how the feedback system works. And under normal circumstances, these feedback system regulates the thyroid activity to maintain a relatively stable level of thyroid hormones in the blood. All right, and speaking about the thyroid diseases, the 2 main types of thyroid diseases are hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. So hyperthyroidism is caused by too much thyroid hormone, which speeds up the body from functions. And hypothyroidism is caused by diseases that result in little thyroid hormone being produced, which result in slowing of which results in slowing of body functions. And actually, both of them can be classified into 3 types according to the different causes. Firstly, the primary type, which is due to the lesions on the thyroid itself. And secondly, the secondary type, lesions on the pituitary gland is the cause of this type. And the tertiary type, or the tertiary hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism, is because of the lesion on the hypothalamus. And both conditions can be caused by other diseases that impact the way the thyroid gland works. For example, conditions that cause hypothyroidism includes thyroiditis. This condition is actually an inflammation of the thyroid glands, which will cause the swelling of the thyroid glands. And thyroiditis can lower the amount of hormones your thyroid produces. Also, gota, which is an abnormal enlargement of your thyroid gland. While other conditions that causes hypothyroidism also includes Hashimoto's thyroiditis, like iodine deficiency, congenital hypothyroidism, or pituitary disorder. So there are many factors that might lead to a lower amount of thyroid hormones. Or similarly, many reasons could also result in the hyperthyroidism as well. For example, the thyroiditis and gota that we have just mentioned can also lead to hyperthyroidism. And Graves' disease, which has a pretty obvious signs of bulging eyes, as you can see here, can also cause hyperthyroidism. And thyroid tumor, of course, is able to stimulate excessive thyroid hormones and causes hyperthyroidism. Right, and there are other diseases as well, like excessive iodine and nodules and some other more. But all in all, many diseases are possible to lead to hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. Also, symptoms may vary depending on the type of thyroid diseases. Like some of the symptoms of hypothyroidism here include like hair loss or thinner hair or puffy face for some people, and sometimes enlarged thyroid, slow heart rates, weight gain, constipation, infertility, fertility problems in women, sometimes heavy or irregular menstrual periods for women as well. Also, other symptoms like dry skin, muscle weakness, trouble tolerating cold, like fatigue, depression, etc., etc. And some examples of the symptoms of hyperthyroidism include also hair loss, with bulging eyes, which is quite obvious, gota as well, and rapid heart rate, weight loss, infertility, diarrhea, also less frequent or lighter menstrual periods for women, intolerant to heat, something else like increased sweating, like they cannot sleep well, the anxiety, stuff like that. So there are really many possible signs of thyroid diseases. And symptoms of a particular thyroid diseases can vary from person to person as well. And the symptoms might be overt, which is pretty obvious, or in other times subclinical. I mean, the symptoms are pretty mild, which is not severe enough to present definitely observable symptoms. However, patients, they can have few or no symptoms at first, but they would worsen over time. And these are the example symptoms that I mentioned just now. As you can see, sometimes the signs of hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism can be reversed. They have completely different symptoms, but at the same time, they could also share the same symptoms as well. For example, the muscle weakness, fatigue, etc., etc. But anyway, even though we said that the symptoms might not be quite obvious at first because the disease is just subclinical. However, it can be shown by blood test result. And that's one of the reasons why blood tests can be helpful to figure out the disease at an early stage, and so that we can take the treatment as early as possible. Well, this page tells you about the diagnostic methods for thyroid diseases. Firstly, a physical exam and a complete medical history are pretty important in diagnosing a thyroid disease. And this cannot be ignored when considering the patient's thyroid function. With this information, also with the use of laboratory tests, mainly the blood test, the doctors are able to evaluate your thyroid and help make a diagnosis. Sometimes the imaging scans or biopsies may be used as well. And today we will mainly talk about the blood test for thyroid functions in lab. All right, so now I believe it's time for us to take a look at the third part of today's webinar, the thyroid test items and their clinical uses. All right, what's shown on the right is what people would normally detect when studying their thyroid function, including TSH, T4, T3, FT4, FT3. These five are normally ordered as a combination. Other tests may also include TG, TBG, anti-TG, and anti-TPO. I've just introduced a bit about these test items for you at the beginning of today's webinar, and I'm going to talk more in later. Okay, so thyroid function tests, TFTs, they are a group of tests that can help you to diagnose a thyroid disorder in person with signs and symptoms. So basically, if someone presents some symptoms of thyroid diseases and they come to the doctor will order these kind of tests for this person depending on the symptoms that this person is presenting. Okay, and the second function of these tests are to monitor the treatment or therapy in people with thyroid disorders. Basically, if this person is under treatment of thyroid diseases, we might order these test items from time to time to evaluate whether the treatment is effective or not. And thirdly, TFTs can help evaluate the function of the pituitary gland, and TFT aims at measuring the concentration of a series of thyroid hormones and thyroid biomarkers. So normally TSH, T4, T3, FT4, FT3, these 5 tests may be ordered together as a thyroid panel when someone has symptoms of hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism, or when a person has an enlarged thyroid gland or thyroid nodules. Well, and then depending on the initial test results and the suspected thyroid disease, additional blood tests may be ordered as well, including TG, TBG, anti-TG, and anti-TPO. And these test items may also be ordered at regular intervals when an individual is being treated for a known thyroid disorder. And now I'm going to introduce these test items for you one by one. And let's talk about TSH first. So thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, is produced by the pituitary glands, which stimulates the thyroid by binding to the TSH receptor to release the T4 and T3 into the blood. Well, one of the most important clinical uses of TSH is that it is always the first test to be ordered when doctors are trying to examine patients when they show symptoms of a thyroid disorders. So this means that when a person is presenting some kind of thyroid disorders and this person comes to the doctor will always prescribe the TSH test for this person at first before doing some other test items. Okay, I hope this is pretty clear. So this is why TSH is the most important test items in the thyroid panel, because it is highly demanding and is used quite frequently. Well, secondly, as we have mentioned, if the TSH level is abnormal, the doctor will usually order a blood test for T4 and T3, or FT4 and FT3. Or sometimes these 3 tests may be ordered together at first as a thyroid panel. Also, TSH is pretty crucial because it is used as the newborn screening test in many countries as well. Like I've just mentioned, newborns are routinely screening within days of birth by TSH test for congenital hypothyroidism. So there are 3. So like I've just mentioned, 1 out of 14 newborns may be suffering from the congenital hypothyroidism. So in many countries, TSH is used for the newborn screenings as well. Yeah, so these are 3 of the most vital applications of TSH. All right, and later, the next 2 test items that I'm going to introduce are T4 and T3. T4 and T3, they are 2 major hormones produced by the thyroid glands, which help control the rate at which the body uses energy, and they are pretty similar in structure, as you can see at the right. They are pretty similar in structure apart from these. This is the difference between them. But yeah, you don't need to know much of the details here. Okay, so most of the hormone produced by the thyroid is actually T4. This hormone is relatively inactive, but it is converted into the much more active T3 in the liver. Or sometimes they can be used to monitor the effectiveness of treatment and to monitor the individuals with thyroid cancers. Okay, so these are the most important clinical values of T4 and T3. Basically, they will be used along with TSH as a combination to help you diagnose the thyroid diseases. Right, like I've just mentioned, most of the T4 and T3 circulate in the blood. They are bound to a protein, mainly the TBG. They were bound to this kind of protein in the blood. While in the blood, just a small percentage of T4 and T3 are free, unbound, and they are actually called the FT4 and FT3. Therefore, even though the total T4 and T3 tests, they have been used for many years, and they can be, however, they can be affected by the amount of protein available in the blood to bind to the hormones. However, FT4 and FT3, they are not affected by the protein levels, and that's why FT4 and FT3 tests, they are recently thought by many to be a more accurate reflection of thyroid hormone function. And in most cases, its use has replaced that of the total T4 and T3 test. But this is not always the case, and some professional guidelines recommend the total T3. So either test may be used to access thyroid function at the moment. But for example, FT3 or sometimes T3 may be ordered alone, or even they can be used together. Like they could use 5 tests together. They will use TSH, T3, T4, FT3, and FT4. They will use all these 5 tests together. Or sometimes they would just use TSH, FT3, FT4, or TSH, T3, and T4. So yeah, basically different countries and different regions, they might have different choices of the test panels that we use clinically. But anyway, well, this is our diagram that shows you how the thyroid disorders is managed normally. Seen from this figure, you can see that TSH is always the first test to be considered when you are trying to examine the thyroid functions of patients. And now let's take the condition when TSH is low, for example, to see how do we use this diagram. So yeah, for example, if the TSH is low, then we should consider the patient's FT4 or T4 level. And let's say if they are low as well, we come to here. Then let's see the FT3 or T3 level. And this time, if again, these are low as well, we should consider this person with secondary hypothyroidism. Okay, I hope this is quite clear for you. So yeah, see, this is how the diagram is used. So every test is pretty routinely used. All you need is the result of these tests, and you look for it in this diagram, and you will see what's going on in these patients, and you will do it in some other way as well. For example, if you find high TSH, you come to here. Again, 5 FT4 and T4, you come to here, and you will draw to this kind of conclusion that this patient is suffering from secondary hyperthyroidism. Yeah, so basically, this is how this diagram would use, and I'm going to share with you the slides later if you could request this to me or to the corresponding sales managers that you are contacting with. Okay, and the next test items I'm going to introduce is TBG. TBG is a protein that's produced by the liver. Its main purpose is to bind to the thyroid hormones and then carry them through your bloodstream so that they can regulate your metabolism and perform other important functions. So when combining with other thyroid biomarkers, TBG can help access what causes may be responsible for the thyroid problems. Okay, for example, increased TBG might be found in hypothyroidism, but also it might be found in liver diseases, genetic diseases, or pregnancy situations. Similarly, decreased TBG might be found in hyperthyroidism, but at the same time, they might be found in liver failure as well, and maybe disease like severe systemic illness as well. So yeah, if you have if you have abnormal thyroid hormone levels in the body, it might be because of your thyroid, but at the same time, it might be because of some other reasons as well. For example, it might be because of the liver, and TBG could help you distinguish whether it is because of the thyroid or not. So basically, When your thyroid hormone levels are high or low, it can be due to several different conditions, some that involve the thyroid gland's functions and others that don't. And the TBG levels can help to point toward which one may be responsible. So yeah, this is the main clinical values of TBG. All right, finishing TBG, the next one is TG. TG is also a protein and it is produced uniquely by your thyroid gland. TG actually serves as the source of T3 and T4, and its level increases in both benign situations, for example, these kind of diseases, this kind of thyroiditis, and most of the time, TG levels might increase in thyroid cancer. So it can be used as a thyroid tumor marker for thyroid cancer. And there are actually many types of thyroid cancer, including DTC, MTC, and ATC. And as you can see, among them, DTC can be further divided into PTC and FTC. And yes, not every thyroid cancer will produce TG, but the most common type, which is the DTC, will frequently result in the increased level of TG in the blood. So TG is still a pretty useful tumor marker for the thyroid cancer. And here, as you can see, a large proportion, as you can see at the right, a large proportion of thyroid cancer is DTC. As you can see, around 75% of thyroid cancer is PTC, and around 15% of the thyroid cancer is FTC, and these are all DTC. So basically, over 90% of the thyroid cancer is DTC. And in this kind of cancer, you would find elevated TG. Therefore, the most clinical values of TG is that it can be used as a tumor marker to evaluate the effectiveness of treatment for thyroid cancer and to monitor for recurrence. And several TG levels may be ordered over a period of time to look at the change in levels, basically to help you monitor whether the treatment is effective or not. All right, and TG can also be used to help determine the cause of hyperthyroidism and to monitor the effectiveness of treatment. And finally, it could be used to help determine the cause of congenital hyperthyroidism in newborns. But the most important clinical value is still the tumor marker. Well, lastly, I will introduce the thyroid test for two thyroid autoantibodies, anti-TG and anti-TPO. So thyroid autoantibodies, they are the antibodies that develop when a person's immune system mistakenly targets components of the thyroid gland or thyroid proteins. This will lead to autoimmune disorders associated with hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, such as Graves' disease or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So in general, the presence of thyroid antibodies suggests the presence of an autoimmune thyroid disorders. And yeah, the higher the level, the more likely it is. Okay, so this gives them their clinical values is to help diagnose an autoimmune thyroid disease and to distinguish it from other forms of thyroid function. As you can see, these figures below is like about the anti-TPO. As you can see here, the anti-TPO is 90% likely to be positive in Hashimoto thyroiditis and 75% likely to be positive in the Graves' disease. And these two kind of disease, they are the most common two types of autoimmune thyroid disorders. However, only 10% of patients with goiter or thyroid cancers will find a positive anti-TPO in their body. Therefore, anti-TG and anti-TPO can be used to distinguish the autoimmune thyroid disease from other forms of thyroid dysfunctions. And therefore, the clinical use of anti-TPO is that these antibodies is an antibody directly against TPO. It is the most common test for autoimmune thyroid disease, and it can be detected in Graves' disease or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And for anti-TG, these antibody targets TG, the storage form of thyroid hormones, right? Which can damage the thyroid gland and affect its function after binding to TG. And anti-TG present in thyroid cancer, also in Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Okay, so far I've finished in the introduction of 9 test items in the in the thyroid test panels. Before going to a conclusion table of these test items, I would like to address that for healthy pregnant women, the thyroid function may be altered as well. So pregnancy causes normal changes in the function of many glands, including the thyroid gland. And as you can see in the table below, that the level change of thyroid hormones are pretty common for mother during the whole trimester. So it is important to know that thyroid test may be affected by this as well. But at the same time, thyroid hormone is critical for brain development in the baby. And therefore, pregnant women with symptoms or a non-thyroid disorder will usually be tested at intervals to detect and monitor hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism during pregnancy and after delivery of the baby. Sorry. Yeah, so basically, thyroid tests are a pretty common and useful test for pregnant women as well. All right, and finally, I'm going to share with you the conclusion table of how the level of different thyroid hormones is changed under different conditions. So just like what we did before, all you need is the result of these tests, and then you try to figure out what's going on in this patient using this table. For example, let's take this as well. For example, if you encounter a patient with lower level of TSH, T4, T3, FT4, FT3, then the patient is most likely suffering from the secondary hypothyroidism. And at the same time, if the anti-TPO and anti-TG in this patient are positive as well, then the secondary hypothyroidism of this patient is pretty likely to be caused by the autoimmune disease. Yeah, so this is how this table is used. And yeah, I'm going to share this slide with you later so you can look for it in this table. All right, and I know so far we have introduced lots of the information. So yeah, we will send you the slides, so don't worry. And after knowing what they are used for, how they should be used, let's now see some real data of lipotronic clinical performance of thyroid test items. And I'm going to share with you some raw data that we collected. All right, this is a table that concludes all of the test items that we have mentioned today. And actually, these are in the IFU as well. So yeah, feel free to contact us if you want to see detailed information. But seeing from this table, we can tell that the test time for our thyroid test are just 80 minutes. Although this is the normal speed of our analyzers, it is actually relatively faster than other analyzers on market. For example, the architect from Abbott will spend around 28 minutes to detect their thyroid test, and Beckman-Coulter, which I can't memorize precisely, but they would take around 30 to 40 minutes as well. So 80 minutes is pretty rapid in the thyroid test. And the sensitivity of our analyzer is pretty excellent, as you can tell from the test range. The reference range is what we detected and defined from thousands of samples that we collected during the research, and the within run CV could be controlled within around 7.5%. Finally, the traceability system of our test items are basically either international, WHO, or EU standardized materials. So don't worry about the traceability system as well. All right, speaking about the performance of our test, I'm going to take TSH, FT4, and FT3 as example. What's on the left is from the correlation report that our R&D team developed during the validation process. So basically, we compared our test with the one from Roche, and in the TSH test, we could achieve a linear correlation coefficient of 0.99 when comparing with Roche. And what's on the right is from the data that we collected from one of the hospitals in China. Well, basically, we tested 20 samples using both the Cobas E411 from Roche and our ECL 8000. It turns out the result interpretations were just the same when using both analyzer. And both of us successfully identified the one sample that is out of range. Well, the result is basically just the same when detecting FT4 with a linear correlation coefficient of 0.98. And then clinically, the result interpretations were just the same when using both analyzer. And again, both of us identify the one sample that is out of range. Still, the correlation between our FT3 test is pretty excellent as well. This time, both of us recognized that 3 samples that are out of range in the hospitals, and still the result interpretations are just the same. Well, therefore, we can proudly draw to the conclusion that our analyzer, as the only analyzer apart from Roche that is using ECL on the market, can completely replace the analyzer from Roche, and we have a pretty good correlation with Roche. Okay, and then talk about the repeatability study. The CV that I just showed you are the ones that we written on our iView, and these are the raw data that we collected during our QC process. Still, let's take TSH, FT4, and FT3 as examples. As you can see, the within run CV of these test items are pretty perfectly to be controlled at around 2%. And this is the same both for the low value results and high value results. And for the between run CV, TSH can be controlled within 5%, and FT4 and FT3, they are under 8%, but they are both under the acceptable CV, which is 15%. So this could double assure you that our test items are pretty stable. All right, and lastly, I concluded some advantage about testing products. Finally, firstly, the rapid measurements, only 9 minutes. To get the first test result when using ECL, this is super fast. Even for our 18-minute thyroid test, they are still faster than any other brands. And secondly, the testing platform is super advanced and reliable. The CV could be controlled within 10%, and actually even lower than that for most of the tests at around 8%. And ECL is nowadays the most advanced chemiluminescence technology. And thirdly, our result is quantitative. A quantitative result definitely makes more sense. It gives you more information about patients, and it could better help you during the treatment and during the prevention and even the prognosis of the patients. And finally, the operation is very easy because it's a fully automated system. You don't need to do much, which is more convenient and safer because it avoids the contact with the sample. And this can minimize the risk and save you lots of effort. Okay, so by now, these are everything I would like to cover today. Well, thank you so much for your attention, and thank you so much for your time and your patience. If you have any queries, please feel free to contact us. We would answer questions at the moment. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your attendance. Do you have any questions regarding our products or about the thyroid diseases? You could turn on your microphone and speak to us. We are ready to help you. Some of our sales colleagues are here as well.
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Hello. Hi, John.
Can you hear me? Yeah, my question is as regard to third party control.
Hi, John.
Third party control.
Sorry, I can hear you, but your voice is not so clear. Sorry, I can hear you, but the voice is not so clear. There's so many noises. Could you type your question on the chat box so I can see it as well?
All right. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, does anyone has other questions? Okay, I'm seeing a question from John. Thank you. My question is that if there is third-party control, at the moment we use our own QC control. However, you could also use the third-party control as well in our analyzer. It's just that you will need to set a range for the third-party control that are using, which our service engineers will guide you through all of this. Oh, another thing is that if you are asking about the third-party control evaluation, the RACOS evaluation is ongoing and the report will be released soon. Okay. Okay, does anyone else has any questions? I'm here for you. Also, our sales teams are here for you as well. But yeah, anyway, if nothing reminds to you at the moment, you can also email us after this webinar and send your queries or concerns to us so we can reply your email. Okay, I'm going to wait for another 1 minute. If no one has more questions, I'm going to play our company introduction video one more time, and I'm going to close this meeting after the video is finished. Once again, thank you so much for your attention, and thank you so much for your attending. Yeah, I'm seeing another question. What about the reference range? It is universally accepted. About this question, actually, we offer you the reference range that we sorry, let me share my screen once again for you. Actually, from here, from the fourth column that you can see here is the reference range that we set according to the sample that we collected during our R&D process. And this is from our recommendations. But we do suggest you to set your own reference range in your local areas because the range might be altered from race to race, from person to person. So yeah, we do recommend you to set your own range according to the data that you collected from your local area. But if you don't want to do so, you could also use our reference range here. Another question is that, can we use the Roche Cobas range for evaluation or validation? Yes, definitely, you could use that as the validation. Also, if you would like to see the data in advance, we could share with you the correlation report that we did from our side. And after which, if you are interested in our product, you could also evaluate this by yourselves as well. Yes, the results are very much correlated with Roche Cobas result. Yes, definitely. Another question is that, do you have any recommendations for the range? So far, we don't, because this range is set during the R&D process by examining over 1,000 samples. And after examining so many samples, we draw to this kind of conclusion. And yes, we do recommend you to set your own range during you using our analyzer and our products. But if you don't want to do so, these ranges work as well. Another question is, how about the reagent stability? While speaking about the reagent stability, it depends on the test items that you are using. So some of our test items, we could support a 12-month shelf life when unopened and a 28 days onboard stability. However, from some other test items, we could offer an 18-month shelf life and 8 weeks, which is 56 days onboard reagent stability. So that really depends on the test items that you are using. At the moment, for our thyroid test, the shelf life will be 12 months and 28 days for onboard stability. But we are definitely trying to expand this to a longer time. We will expand it to 15 to 18 months pretty soon. Okay, sure. I will share with you the materials after this webinar. Okay, about the calibration frequency, for most of our tests, it will be 28 days. Okay, I'm seeing another question for the pediatric range. I could share with you the recommendations for the pediatric. Okay, another question is about, what about interference? This is written on the IFU, so there are some, but I can't memorize all. If you could allow me a few seconds, I could share with you the IFU so you can see these are all written on the IFU. Okay, so I'm sharing with you the IFU of our FT3. As you can see in our IFU, there's a part called limitations. And in this part, you will see all the possible interference of our products. Another question is what methods in thyroid they are using and how many access steps? Well, there will be 2 steps, so that's 18-minute test. And the method is mainly the sandwich principle. Another question is the COBAS result matching problem. So yeah, could you please share with us the raw data that you collected during the process so we could evaluate this? But during the uses in some of our European countries, in the Latin Americas, also in Asian countries, the result interpretation are just the same and the correlation are pretty well. So maybe something is wrong during the transportation process and something is wrong. For example, if you put the reagent upside down, this will influence the reagent as well. So yeah, maybe some reason affect this, but could just share with us the raw data so we could evaluate this for you. But most of the time, the test results are pretty excellently correlated with the one for Roche, and we could share with you the report if you would like to see some. And we could also share with you the reports that we collected from some reference lab in European country, and they have tested our test, and our test result can perfectly correlate with the one from Roche. Another question is about the number of tests per kit. So far, we offer 50 tests per kit, also 100 tests per kit. Another question is about the pediatric range. Okay, I can share with you one. Yes, about the correlation report, if you could contact your corresponding sales managers, we could share with you that, definitely. Okay, I hope my answers are quite clear for you. If something's wrong, please ask me. Oh, okay, again, about the pediatric range. Okay, I have one in Chinese version, and I'm going to translate this in English if you would like to see this, but we can offer you our recommendations. Pediatric range, I believe this is I believe this is different from test to test. Let me open this document for you. But these are in Chinese, sorry. So I would need to translate this before sending them to you. But yeah, as you can see, these are the T4 recommendation range for newborns. So this is for newborns. These are for children. They are around 6 days to 3 months. But yeah, we have this kind of profile and we could share with you this after this webinar, and I will need to translate this to you. Okay, so definitely we could share with you this. We have recommend range for T4, T3, FT4, FT3, and TSH, and some other more as well. As you can see, we have many. Okay. But if you require any materials or contents or about the videos of today's, please contact your corresponding sales managers and we will share with you the materials. Another question is about, can you recommend dilution of samples? Okay, as far as I know, most of the thyroid tests, they will not need to be diluted at first. At least not many samples should be diluted. So we don't do the automatic dilution of thyroid tests in our analyzer. But if this sample do require to be diluted, you could dilute it as well. Okay, so these are for the thyroid test. However, for some other tests, that would need to be diluted very frequently. For example, HCG, I guess that one needs to be like diluted. So our analyzer could do the automatic dilution for that test item. All right, another question. Time to first result, 18 minutes. How about succeeding results? Okay, so about the first test result is 18 minutes, and any other succeeding results would take 42 seconds. So for the throughput, it will be 86 tests per hour. And another question is, how about the first result for infectious disease? Well, this really depends on what kind of test items that you are doing. For example, for some of our infectious test items, we offer stat test, and they will be around 9 to 18 minutes. However, for some others, we do need 18 minutes to 27 minutes. Yeah, so that depends on the test items that you are doing. And if you are interested in this, we could share with you the tables after this webinar so you can see it in details. Okay, I'm seeing another question about neutralizing antibody compared to VNT. So about neutralizing antibody, at the moment, we could share with you a correlation report, which our product's test result is correlated with the one from the WHO materials. So basically, WHO, they released a standardized materials for the neutralizing antibody, and we use our test to detect the WHO materials, and the results are perfectly correlated. So by doing so, you could converse our test results with the one from WHO. Okay, if you're interested in this, please allow me a few seconds so I can show you the reports, show you the correlation. Okay, as you can see, this is a diagram that shows you how our test result is correlated with the one from WHO. Basically, WHO, they offer this kind of materials with different concentration. For example, at low concentration at around here, or high concentration to 1,000 IU per milliliters. And we use our test items to detect the WHO international standardized materials. And it turns out that our neutralizing antibody test can indeed detect the WHO materials at different concentrations. So yeah, basically we can offer you this kind of report so you can convert different units. Okay, thank you for your feedbacks and questions. I really appreciate this, and I hope my answers is quite clear. If something's not clear for you still, please feel free to contact me by email. Another question is, can you give the installation step of the machine? Of course, we could give you this. And this is actually uploaded in our YouTube channel as well, so you can see the video showing the installation step. But also our service engineers will guide you through this if you will need this kind of training. Yeah, definitely we could share with you this. And we are actually organizing this kind of webinars from time to time to help you during the usage, during the operation of the analyzer. Another question is about the time for neutralizing antibody test. All of our antibody tests, including the neutralizing antibody test, would take 9 minutes to get the first test results. Okay, so I believe this is pretty rapid when comparing with other products, especially when comparing with ELISA, which is pretty complicated, which might take around 2 hours. So 9 minutes is really rapid. Okay, let me mark this for you. So these test items that are marked in yellow are the stat tests that we can offer you at the moment, and they are all 9-minute tests. So yeah, including neutralizing antibody test that you are interested in. Also, what is the range of neutralizing antibody? If you are using our products, the range would be 1 to 600 AU per milliliters. Another question, are you going to organize a talk on neutralizing antibody for a system? Yeah, actually, we have done many about the neutralizing antibody test, but if you would like to have more, definitely we could arrange this kind of webinar for you. Also, just contact your sales managers, and if you find it necessary, we will definitely do so. Another question, is there practical sum tests in the machine or installed automatically? Okay, so the practicals, they are installed into the analyzer automatically. If you could scan the RFID of the reagents, the analyzer will recognize the reagents and they will do anything else automatically. You don't need to do much. You don't need to record anything. The analyzer will do it for you. You're welcome. I hope this is clear. Okay. Okay, thank you for your feedback. I was just saying, sorry that I muted myself just now. Sorry. So I'm going to say this one more time. Well, I'm going to close this meeting at the moment because I believe I've answered all the questions of you. If I miss somebody, please let me know. But yeah, anyway, if you have any queries after this webinar, if something else reminds you later, please feel free to email me as well, or the sales managers, so we could answer your question anytime. And yeah, I really appreciate your attending and your attention. So before I end this meeting, I'm going to share with you the company introduction video one more time, so you can enjoy it. But if you don't want to see it, or if you have seen it, just feel free to go. Thank you. Just feel free to leave this webinar. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to, I will share with you the presentation. Okay, so yeah, once again, thank you so much for attending. I'm going to share with you this company introduction, and please enjoy it. After this video, just feel free to leave this webinar, or I will close this webinar as well. Thank you.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम वालेकुम PIDC कब किया है इन्होंने, किस डेट को किया है? तो मैं दोबारा
Okay, guys. Thank you so much for attending. I'm going to close this meeting now. Thank you so much. If you have any queries, please feel free to contact us. Thank you so much. Bye. Have a nice day, guys.